Chicago and Milwaukee. And I worked there starting from the age of 14. And my first job there was a parking attendant, where I was a human blinker for a couple of weeks. And then I got a job inside the fair. And I quickly started the process of learning everything anybody would teach me, right? So I learned how to do food preparation, or juggling, or fire breathing, or whip targeting, or making chainmail, or anything that basically could get you paid in this kind of environment. But I had two guys that were absolute heroes to me. And those of you that have been to any substantial Renaissance fairs around the country will know who I'm talking about. Dirk Perfect and Guido Crescendo are the swordsmen. And the Swordsman is a world-class stage combat show and comedy show. And I watched these guys show over and over and over again. And they'd be different shows, throughout the day, but then they would repeat, right? So they had 5 different shows that you could do. And I knew every one of them by heart. I just studied these guys. And when I worked there for 3 or 4 years, and then as I got out of high school, I decided to travel. And I wanted to work in Renaissance fairs in different parts of the country. And eventually I felt like I was good enough to become a stage performer, to get my own stage show. So I auditioned at the Ohio Renaissance Festival to get a stage show, and I was going to do whip targeting, fire breathing, juggling, and comedy. And I auditioned with one of the hardest tricks that you can do in whip targeting is to cut something from a person's mouth with a bullwhip. So this was my opening trick. So I brought the entertainment director up and drew back, and first try, cut it right now. Now I practiced this for hours and days and days and days. This is not a thing that you typically take lightly, right? You've got somebody's face literally in your hands, right? So you take this pretty seriously. So I executed this trick and I got the gig. So the Ohio Renaissance Fair has 5 or 6 stages that you can be assigned to, and when the stage assignments came out, I was assigned to the same stage as the swordsman. And I was amazed by this, right? How far I had come in such a short period of time. I'd started working in fairs at about the age of 14, learning everything, and about 5 years later of practicing and learning and studying and doing all this, I had the time slot right before the swordsman. They were on right after me, and this was mind-blowing to me. So I start my show, and I've got, I've got all my tricks. I've got fire breathing, and I've got devil sticks and clubs and torches and some audience stuff. But the opening trick is this whip trick. And I started with the whip because it makes a lot of noise and draws attention, right? It's an open fair, so you want to try to get as many people as you can, because this is how you make money, right? The larger your audience, the more tips, and in theory, this is how you, eat the next day. So I would do this trick and executed it flawlessly. I had 5 shows a day, Saturday and Sunday. And I did this for 3 weeks without a problem, but the only struggle that I had in the show was that it wasn't very funny, right? So the tricks were really good, and people were amazed by the tricks, but it wasn't particularly funny. And I noticed that the swordsmen had watched my show. I saw them in the audience, and I watched them watch my show. They were in street clothes, and it was the Sunday of the 3rd week, and they had watched my show, and then I stuck around and watched their show. And afterwards, we're sitting backstage, and for the first time, I asked them for any feedback. And they got real quiet. And they both basically said that I was not good enough to be doing that whip trick. That they have friends that do that trick in other festivals, and they practice it 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, so that they can execute it perfectly on Saturday and Sunday. And they asked if I was practicing it that much, and I said no. I said I'm practicing it, but the finale of my show was I had a set of flaming devil sticks that I would twirl in the air, throw them up in the air, and then blow fire through them. And I'd never seen anybody do this trick since, and it was a really popular trick. But I'm more worried about setting myself or the stage on fire than I am about this whip targeting trick. But this is the thing they were focused on. Not that the show wasn't funny, this trick. And I was kind of taken back by it. I was a little surprised. But that was really their main feedback. So I spent the rest of the week ruminating or just kind of stewing on what they had said and practicing the hell out of this trick all week long. And so finally Saturday morning came around. It was my first show since I'd had this conversation with these idols of mine. And I was so nervous about it that instead of drawing a random audience member up, I'd asked a friend of mine to be a plant, a guy named Jason. So it's that time of the show. I pulled Jason up, and again, I was so worried about it that I didn't let him put it in his mouth. I just told him to hold it in his hand. Now, to execute this trick properly, the way that you do this is you line your thumb up with the target, so that when you draw back and then make the wave in the whip, it cracks exactly where you expect it to. And a millimeter difference in your hand here is 2 feet on the other end, right? Because it's a wave, right? So I go to do this trick. Jason's standing there, he's got the straw in his hand, and something that I had never done before, I drew back and I put just the slightest curve in my hand. And I'd never done it before. And it was like slow motion in my mind. But of course, it was just a fraction of a second. And it spiraled, and it missed that straw by about 1.5 feet, and it wrapped around his arm and cut his arm. Now, he was a pro. He didn't scream, he didn't carry on, he didn't do anything. He just looked at me with this face like, ow. and I could see that he was hurt. Now, he wasn't going to bleed to death right there in front of me on the stage, but he was clearly injured. So I stopped, and I turned to the audience and I said, big hand for Jason, everybody, we're going to move on. And he walks off the stage. Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? So he walks off, and he gets a round of applause from the audience, and the audience applauses are always different. And this one was like the applause that you give a football player who gets up after being injured, right? It's just kind of like, hey, way to hang in there, buddy. Like, it was not good. So I watched him walk off the stage and walk through the crowd and go find an EMT. And what he did. So I put the whip down, and to this day, I have never used that whip or any whip in a stage show ever again. And I performed stage shows for years after that. In fact, that day I had 4 more shows to do and changed my show right there so that I wouldn't have to use that whip again. So I don't know what the moral of the story is, right? So I've had this kind of in my mind for years, and I'm going to give you the same questions that I have in my mind, which are, if the swordsman would have never said anything, would I have still had the problem? Would I still have hit Jason if they hadn't said anything? Or did they save me from my own ignorance and my own arrogance in this trick? Or is this a demonstration of the power of negative thought? Right? So those are the questions that I have, and I will leave them with you. Thank you.